Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another recap episode. Thanks, sponsors with me since the beginning. Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. It started off 874 in this group of 25. The origin story for Jade Aspress from ComC. He does come back in this group of 25, but he'll probably be back again as well. Had a good chat with the Jade, lots of different experiences within ComC and within the hobby, and that's the kind of guest I like to interact with, somebody who's passionate about it and has some different perspectives based on good experience, which again is the greatest hobby in the world. 875 recap, don't talk about that. 876, dueling questions with Danny Black. Getting to know Danny, I met him at the National last summer. A good friend of John Newman's, radio experience, lots of other broad hobby and sports experience, consulting mindset, which I obviously appreciate. So it's fun to hear what he's working on and to duel questions with him. So there's several other episodes, and I'm also seeing him and working with him on Hobby Hotline. Really appreciate his expertise and willingness to jump in the fray. 877, another good friend now from this podcast, John Keating. He had sent me a number of questions, and sometimes I'll do them without the person there, but I think he's a lot of fun to work with, dry sense of humor and sharp. And we were just thinking maybe this is not such a green hobby when we're chopping down all these trees to print cards. On the other hand, there are some things where there's some conservation within the industry that it's maybe not as bad as it seems to be. Thanks, John. I'm enjoying hearing your perspectives on things. 878 was the married couples. I didn't really know how to title this, but Stefan and Angela Loeffler were over here with Rich, and they came over and we just did some looking at cards and sorting cards and then turned on the recorder. And I just thought, what's the dynamic of a married couple coming in? And a lot of it was Angela. You could see they have a partnership in their marriage and in the hobby, but they hobby differently. And Angela just has stories of how she doesn't get the respect that she deserves. And that's a shame. I think people ought to evaluate people not based on stereotypes or preconceived notions, but there's a lot of more women and married couples that are and will be in this industry. So we need to get used to it and not think that's such an exception. Thanks, Angela and Stefan, for sharing your story and that we could just talk about that. Again, if a couple that collects together, stays together. 879 was the tribute to Ray Guy, the Hall of Fame punter. And again, he's younger than me. So he's not just my age. He's a year younger. And I do make some distinction when I'm doing this. I really enjoy doing the tributes in a bittersweet way. Anybody I do a tribute of is really worthy, but they don't have to be worthy based on being a Hall of Famer. I really enjoy doing the tributes to the hobbyists that probably are Hall of Fame hobbyists in many cases as well, and legends within the hobby, but not always known to the younger generation. So I'm going to continue doing tributes. It's one of the things I really enjoy. It's just appropriate to give honor due to somebody for a life well lived or a great career or just contributions to the sport or the hobby. 880 was dueling questions with Logan Ward, King NASCAR. And very much of a hobby veteran, so we're going to be on the same page on a lot of things. Former baseball card guy, now mostly NASCAR, has come to some of my content creator dinners. Sharp guy and has a great collection and helpful to others, so appreciate Logan. 881 was the dueling questions with Danny Black. It's the dueling questions 2.0. Danny may even won a third round at some point. So he's never lost for words. I'm the opposite of Jeremy Lee in Sports Cards Live. I don't like to do a lot of prep. If I know the guest has something to say, and especially if I've already worked with them, we do not prearrange what we're going to talk about. But Danny is very nimble. 882, Alcardholics Anonymous with John Keating. We got into the fact that there are some addictive aspects of being a hobbyist, being a collector. It gets you in trouble if you can't put it down when it's appropriate to go be with your family or to do something to pay your rent. We talked about that. And when alcoholics are around other alcoholics, they don't think they have a problem. But if you talk to somebody that's not, they think, hey, you're making some choices that they're maybe not so good. So John Keating, always provocative questions that caused me to think twice about something. And so this was a decent episode. Maybe not for you, but it might be for a collecting friend, just to have that reference. 883 was dueling questions with Jade. The day after, Jade says, hey, I forgot a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you. Jade, that episode is in the can, but we'll do it again. I always appreciate people, especially when they're on my team back in the day, people that have been there a long time and done a lot of different things. They were really valuable to our company, and I can see how Jade would have that within COMC as well. So looking forward to another conversation with you, Jade. Might be early next year. Tamer Mamoon, questions. He's the music guy. Also collector, met him at Mint Collective. He had written me, and then he sought me out at the Mint Collective. So we got to make that acquaintance, and we scheduled something, and we had a couple episodes in this segment that were fun. A very thoughtful guy, and the connection to music, I think, is interesting and was worth exploring, and he was a good sport. Dueling questions with Stefan and Angela on 885. The interesting thing about that doesn't maybe come across is that, so Angela and Stefan, I told them to have some questions ready that could be for me and or Rich. But I've never been in a situation, I've been in a lot of meetings, and I've never been in a meeting. Usually, if Stefan and Angela, we were at the big table, and so they were across from me, and normally Rich would come along and sit over on my side of the table, but Rich actually sat behind them. So they were doing dueling questions with somebody in front of him and somebody behind him. So it was a strange thing. It allowed Rich to just contribute when he wanted to. And like I said, I've never been to a meeting like that where we had the questioners covered front and back. 886 is the outtakes, the segment from Hobby Hotline about the Pujols 700th home run ball. It was timely at the time, but there's still principles. I always want to be doing evergreen, timeless episode as much as possible. These balls and these memorabilia items that are in the news, they're not always in the news. They're in the news until they're not in the news. And then when the attention dies off, sometimes you need to sell things when they're hot. 887 was the outtakes on autograph cards from Hobby Hotline. And as I've said, back in the day, if you had a VG card and a near mint card, the same card, you would send the VG one in to the player to get it autographed, and you'd keep the near mint one in your set. And there's lots of other stuff we talked about, autograph cards from Hobby Hotline. As always, you're certainly welcome and encouraged to go listen to Hobby Hotline either live or when it's posted to the podcast sites, as well as being on YouTube. 888, the Kyrie Irving. I don't know that he's the most hated NBA player, which I titled, but he's certainly misunderstood or most complicated. And frankly, that does affect his card values. It affects, if you're hated, there's hated and respected, and there's hated and disrespected. So I don't know him personally, but he's got some views that are not the prevailing view of most people, and some people hate that. 889 was prospecting analytics with Jade. He was sharing what he does and has done for a long time. But in the prospecting game, if you sell early, you're probably eliminating some big wins. You probably will win more than you lose if you sell early, but the ones you lose, you could lose really big if somebody hits it big. And I'm not just thinking of a decade ago with Mike Trout. There's lots of examples. I actually sold a couple of Luka rookies, not great ones, but Luka rookies early on just because they were extras. I didn't sell my last one, but I thought I don't need these. And somebody wants them, and they were paying way above. And then if I'd have waited a few more months, I would have done a lot better. The Thanksgiving Thanks, that's the episode where I announced I am thankful that I'm doing this podcast. I'm enjoying doing it, but I'm going to enjoy it more if I go to 3 times a week. I don't care if that means I'll have less listeners. Actually, I hope I have as many or more listeners, but I can't really control that. You can subscribe and you can recommend to your friends, but 3 times a week will be a little less onerous on me and maybe a little less onerous on some of you. I said my goal is to reduce my collection 1% a month. And I'm falling short of that. And so 2023 is going to be better than that because I won't be spending quite as much time on podcasting. And yet I'm going to enjoy the ones that I do. 891, outtakes on Beckett Racing Monthly. That was the 5th or 6th monthly magazine we did. We had a great versatile staff. And then we hired some special expertise. But when I'm talking to Val and Jason and Logan, those guys are really into it. It's my least knowledgeable sport. I'm probably 9 out of 10 guys. I'm more knowledgeable about NASCAR, but I'm not more knowledgeable than the NASCAR radio team. So I love the give and take there. 892 was the title Music and Cards with Tamer. Again, that was just fun. I've already talked about that. 893, the Baseball Hall of Fame Veterans Committee. It's not really the Veterans Committee. It's contemporary era. I admit I was wrong, but I was wrong this time. My thinking is that 3 years from now, we will get another bite at the apple, and it'll be some of the same guys, and we will see. 894 was the Upper Deck Hockey Series 1 box, kind of a review box. That's a flagship. I'm realizing the flagship sets are flagship for a reason, and they're flagship because they are throwbacks to the way that they were done with bigger sets that'll be completable. And again, enjoyed that. $8.95 outtakes on type cards. Again, this was from a NASCAR perspective, but that is such a great way to collect. I think a fair number of people do it. It's not more expensive than picking a player if you're going to pick some interesting thing, but I'm a big fan of collecting type cards, regardless of sport. $8.96 outtakes from Danny's show. He was interviewing me. Of the interviews I've been on, he was the most succinct. So he interviewed me, had some good questions there, got in, got out. Again, a radio veteran, like I said. And also, to his credit, I think a lot of what he was asking me about, I had not answered before. And so I really respect that, appreciate that. And that's why I edited a little bit and put it on my channel. $8.97 and was the outtakes on real estate comps and bounties, NASCAR radio. We had a much longer time because I was having a good time. In the evening, real estate comps, that's big bucks. Your real estate agent is going to try to say, this is a good deal because look at this other house on the same block or a block over. And if you've ever bought a house, they're expensive, and you've got to figure out, is that really a comp that's comparable, or is it not quite as good or a little bit better? Just like in cards, if you go after one house without regard to any other house and you lock in on one house too early, you're going to be at a disadvantage in the negotiation instead of saying, I'm going to get a good house for the money that really works for our family. And then finally, $8.98, the Senior Committee Hall of Famers. We'll see on that. Sports Card Insights, football, still, I believe, is undervalued, underappreciated. It's not just supply and demand, but there's less supply for sure. And I believe there's less supply in higher grades. And you can't always go by the pop reports because there's still a lot of cards out there that have not been graded and are not recognized as how many football cards are out there. There's not as many as baseball, but cards are noticeably tougher pretty much every year until you get to the modern era. Thanks, everybody, and looking forward to being with you 3 times a week. That may change in the future. I'm not promising anything other than I'm on my way to 1,000 and beyond. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Bye-bye.